Welcome to the Graeae and Disability Arts online podcast, Disability And, bringing together thoughtful discussion and debate. This month, Jodi-Alissa Bickerton talks to Baroness Grey-Thompson and Mandy Colleran about disability and politics. This podcast contains some strong language.
Welcome to another podcast of Disability And with Graeae and Disability Arts Online. Today we're in conversation with the Baroness Grey-Thompson, who is a politician, a disability activist, a mother, and the winner of 11 gold Paralympic medals. And we're also with Mandy Colleran, who is a comic, writer, actress, and disability arts activist, and also a very proud Scouser. Okay, Mandy and Tanni, tell us something about yourself that we wouldn't know or the listeners wouldn't know.
I own a bent soprano saxophone and I'm attempting to learn how to play it.
Ooh.
I've got a tattoo on my foot. My husband's got a matching one, which was drawn as a morgue tag, which has the word expired and a date left blank, and whoever dies first, the other one's going to fill it in with a Sharpie pen. So it didn't sound as dark when we agreed to have it done, but actually it's not great, is it?
So, Mandy, are you starting a band or is this a solo career?
I'd like to think of it as a solo career, but in reality it probably isn't. I just always loved the saxophone. And actually I just thought it was good exercise, to be honest, to do breathing.
Good for your lungs,
technique, yeah. And it's such a beautiful thing. A few years ago, a long time ago, actually about 20 years ago, I did this odd job for the BBC. I got this cheque out of the blue and I was happening to pass a music shop in Denmark Street, and I just thought, if I don't buy one now, I'm never going to have one. And so I did.
Brilliant. Okay. So we are here to talk about activism, about disability, about joining bands, becoming empresses and taking over the world.
Yeah.
I think we can fairly say that the last 8 years have been, probably one of some of the most difficult in our lifetime. Would that be fair to say in terms of austerity, in terms of where we are? Are things as bad as they seem, or is there hope?
I think it's a really tough time at the minute. So for lots of levels, the welfare reform bill and, legal aid and a lot of stuff I work on in Parliament was fairly brutal. But then it's the implementation of that as well. And then, it coincides with some really negative attitudes about disability and increase in hate crime. And, what I get a lot of as an ex-athlete is, 2012 changed the world. And it's like, no, it didn't. 2012 was an amazing Olympics and Paralympics. But it's not there to sort out every other crisis. And, what it did was it changed the lives of some Paralympians. But actually the vast majority of disabled people still have a really difficult time. And that's the one thing. If ever I hear somebody saying 2012 changed the world, it's usually a non-disabled person. I do want to scream. And it's like, remember what a good summer it was. But, the reality about education and transport, it's really hard. And really sadly, Brexit hasn't helped any of that, and we're going to be doing that for another 5 years. So I kind of do worry. I'm concerned about what happens next for disabled people.
Mm-hmm. And you're doing a lot of activism around trains at the moment and access on trains, transport.
Yeah, so I sort of came to my activism in sort of a different way. As an athlete, and I was really conscious when I was competing that there were lots of disability rights activists that thought I was a sellout because I was an athlete, and that's fine, it was good, and had lots of quite robust discussions about that, and super crip, and you're just trying to be non-disabled and all this sort of stuff, but I was always really interested in wider disability rights issues, and so as soon as I finished competing, I got more involved, and I guess a lot of it comes from, I just think the world needs to have moved on. We were promised accessible trains 20 years ago, and it was all be patient, January the 1st, 2020, it'll all be fine. We're going to hit January the 1st and nothing will have, bits will have changed, but we're not having step-free transport. So I think I just get stoppier as I get older. So, I'm really lucky. I can do some stuff through Parliament and that way, but also I think, the platform being an athlete gave me, which was just to tell the reality of what disabled people's lives are like, is really important. And I'm also really conscious I get treated way better than most disabled people, because people either know me as a peer or as an ex-athlete, and people are kinder to me. And I went to a train station recently, and one of the members of staff went, "Oh, that's the one who tweets." I was like, "Hello, how are you? Lovely to meet you." But I think that's really important. So it's important, I think, to say, stuff happens to me, but also just get more people to understand what happens to lots and lots of disabled. And it's really hard. It's hard to fight it, deal with it. If you complain, you've got a chip on the shoulder. If you don't complain, you're not changing the world. And, it's just tiring, and it's exhausting, actually. And I think as I get older, I feel it physically and mentally, because, stuff is not as easy as it used to be. But also, I'm just bored of being patient. I just think we need to do something.
Yeah. Mandy, you're nodding there, and as an activist and an influencer, and been around sort of the disability movement for a long time.
Yeah, I think Tanni's right. I think in some ways, I think experience makes you not less tolerant, but it just makes you slightly less patient, because we were around when we were promised the changes. They put men on the moon, men of course, on the moon in 1968, and it wasn't until about 4 years ago that we could actually have a wee on the train. So I'm not quite sure how that happens, really. There are reasons why they can put men on the moon, but they can't make a toilet accessible on a train, or they won't, rather. They can, but they won't. So, and I think you're right, it's very tricky, isn't it? Because when you get older, one of the things you do have is hindsight. And I think things come in cycles, and I think unfortunately at the moment we're in a down cycle again, and it hasn't been helped obviously by the political scenario that we're in at the moment, and certainly for the last 12 years. And I think actually since kind of early 80s and the rise of what they call neoliberalism and aka Mrs. Thatcher and Ronald Reagan's takes on the world, where we've actually become about consumers and individuals rather than communities and societies. That it's made it harder for everybody actually to live, because suddenly people are in competition with each other, and you're treated, everything is about the individual. And so, that makes it harder for, as I say, people to work together and come together. But I think despite that, disability activism has remained and continues. And in some ways, there are aspects that have died off maybe. But then you've also got increased activism around the austerity bill. So you've had the rise of things like Disabled People Against the Cuts, DPAC. It was such a, fantastic and effective campaigning organisation. You've got the rise of Not Dead Yet UK, which is lobbying quite effectively again against the kind of the right to euthanasia and the kind of assisted dying laws. So maybe the areas in which activism takes place have changed, but I don't think it's gone away. And I think it behoves us as people maybe who are a little bit older and have seen things to actually support those things even more.
I think that's really important, because I hear some young people say, it must be better than it used to be, and I think there's some things that are a bit better, and I think there's a whole pile of stuff that's not, and is not improved, and I think a lot of the time I try to kind of be really positive about it, because I just don't want to be this grumpy old cow all the time. But then I'm getting to the point where it's like, do you know what, I'm just going to be a bit of a grumpy old cow about it. And things like, euthanasia, and trying to get across that stuff, that disabled people will be affected. But I had someone say to me recently, well, you must have thought about killing yourself loads of times. It's like, sorry, I got to travel the world as an athlete. I sit in Parliament. I'm
happily married.
I'm doing all right.
Yeah.
And your view of me is that you think that's what I should do, and stuff like. So sometimes I get shocked by it, and then you go, okay, no, it's really good to have that kind of point to focus to say, do you know what, we have to. And one of the things that keeps me going in the stuff I do in Parliament is that there's loads of activists and campaigners on the outside who are there to support, and when it's hard, someone will pick up the phone and just say keep going, or just, and that kind of community is really, really important.
Absolutely. I think that's key, that both Tanni and I do see ourselves, I think, as part of, certainly I do, as part of a community, a wider community of other disabled people. It's not the only community I belong to, but it's probably the most significant community in my life at the moment. And, that's what sometimes annoys me about representations of disability, say, in, TV. Because if you have a disabled character on TV, you can paint your bottoms on, they're the only one. And it's so unrealistic, because I don't know any disabled person that doesn't know at least one other disabled person. Yeah. And often, or has a member in their family, or, has a really strong group of friends and allies, even if it's only people you see regularly at the same clinic as you, or, what you have in common is your impairments, know.
I was growing up, and I sort of was talking about this recently. So the only two wheelchair users I saw growing up was Sandy Richardson on Crossroads, who I think they were going to kill off, and everyone liked him, so it was like, oh, let's stick him in a wheelchair. And I remember he used to be sitting up at the top of a flight of stairs, and you go, how did you get there? There's no lift. So it wasn't real, and I knew he was an actor. And Ironside, and actually, thank goodness, people have stopped calling me Ironside, because that really annoyed me. But so I didn't see people who looked like me growing up. And so the first sort of disabled person I saw in the media that I was like, wow, was Chris Hallam doing the London Marathon, who had dyed blonde hair and an atrocious taste in leopard print bodysuits. And, loved him to bits. He was amazing. And he didn't take nonsense from anybody.
Marvellous.
But, and he'd just tell people to get lost and worse if they irritated him. So, I remember looking at that thinking, oh, wow, there's this kind of route. There's something that I can do. But I think that's really hard, because if there is more representation of disability on TV, it's not real, is it? Or it's like the story is not always about impairment. Or, a lot of the time on TV, they try to do it's all about impairment. It's like, actually, most disabled people's lives aren't like that.
I think that's the problem as well, often, because if there are characters, once the story goes off their impairment, they never know what to do with them.
Yeah, why can't you be just a character? Or, I don't know, here we go, shows my appalling taste in TV. Chris Tate on Emmerdale Farm, when he became a paraplegic, it was all, well, he deserves it because he was evil. And you're like, really? God, I know, just feeling really... And don't even start me on inspiration porn on the coverage of sport, because I think some of that's got worse. There was a point when I started where it'd be like, oh, did you train? Yeah, quite a lot. And then it got better, and now it's all about, you have to have a backstory, and you have to be inspirational, and you have to have something traumatic or dramatic happen in your life, and that's not real for a lot of disabled people either. And
you also have to be, you have to be photo-friendly as well. That's a big thing as well. I think that we don't like to talk about. But, there are, I think, in the same way that there is colorism in terms of race representation, I think there also is impairmentism. That some people and some impairments are much more likely to be put in front of a camera because of the way they look and how they present than other people, and that's an issue. But what I think is quite important, one thing that does worry me, I think, is there are so many more actors out there now, and I think, the things are changing. Things are changing, and you've got people like Mandy Colleran writing for TV now. You've got Jackie Hagan and writers like him, Matilda Rubini, stage, So the writers are starting to emerge, and there are a lot of actors, obviously we see Liz Carr, we've seen Matt in the New Dark Materials, Matt Fraser, Lisa Hammond was on EastEnders for quite a while, so those people are out there, and they're really important to me. It's important for us as people, who've been around a while to see them, but it's really important for young disabled people. And I think one of the things we need to address slightly, and I'm not saying that inclusive education is a bad thing at all, but there was something about going to a special school and being surrounded by lots of people like you, because for many of us as disabled people, you don't necessarily grow up with anyone who looks like you. Many of us don't have disabled members in our family, and actually the only time you were with people who were like you was when you went to school. Now, I'm not saying those things should be exclusive, but my worry is that, as social media and the kind of advertising and things become so strong, that how you look and how you show yourself, how you present to the world becomes so much more important. And I think if you're a disabled person in a class of, 27 other non-disabled people, and your impairment means that you look all you look slightly differently, or you carry out your day-to-day life in a slightly different way. Where do you go to get that solidarity? Where do you go to get, the sense that actually that's fine to look like you? And that's one thing that does worry me, and that's why, the whole thing about representation is so important, because, it comes back to the whole, if you see it, you can be it, which sounds very trite, but actually it's really, really important.
The special school system was really good for sport.
Yeah.
Because you had other people with a similar level of impairment that you could compete against and participate with, and that's changed it quite a lot. And I think, I look at the pressure, especially young women are under,
Absolutely.
To look a certain way and have your hair straightened and your makeup on and your eyebrows done and, your backside implants and like all this stuff. And this is why I'm sounding old again, but I kind of worry there's like an increased sexualisation of young women, and that you have to wear a short dress and get a boob job, and, there's all this stuff which I didn't feel that kind of pressure growing up. But the social media and the photoshopping and all that kind of stuff, I think makes it quite hard. I think if you're disabled, it's sometimes, how do you fit in with this perfect view of this,
yes,
skimpy dress and high heels and, implants everywhere. And I just really struggle with that. I think it's a really tough time for young women to be growing up. I think it's a tough time for young disabled people to be growing up.
Yeah, I do as well. I mean, I think one of the good things that is, on the negative side that social media has had is, unfortunately has caused, the whole spread of kind of image and body images to go viral. But also what's the other positive side of that, though, is disabled people have capitalised on social media, actually, in terms of activism, about making connections. Because if you're stuck in your house in Devon without access because you can't get out, you can connect with the world, you can engage in conversations on a national level on Twitter, if you want to. I'm not saying everybody can or will do, but there, and organisations like DPA, discussions around austerity. I remember being on, I've been on Twitter on and off for about 12 years now, and at the very beginning, the discussions around austerity were happening on Twitter by groups and individuals of disabled people who were actually talking to, journalists and editors of newspapers through Twitter. And those conversations may never have happened as quickly.
When I was doing the welfare reform bill, there were groups of activists who were watching the debates in Parliament, on Parliament Channel, and then were tweeting me.
Yeah.
And saying, ask the minister this, here's a link to something else.
Yes.
And then there was one night where a small group of them started playing Snog, Marry, Kill with members of the government front bench on Twitter and included me in it. And it was like, oh my God, no, which was really funny. It was totally inappropriate, but really funny. And actually, we had a couple of really, really late nights, and I tweeted, not had anything to eat. Does anyone know of a takeaway open? And I sort of gave the vague area where I lived. And I had people saying, oh, you come past my house, come in for a cup of tea.
Aww.
Or, have you been doing welfare reform? I can make you a sandwich. Someone offered to bring a pizza to Piers Entrance. And then I got back to my flat, and I lived in quite a big block at the time. And there was a sandwich outside my door.
Oh.
And you go, oh.
That would have been a woman.
That is so nice. So, I think it was a little message saying, thank you for doing welfare. Oh. And then you kind of go, oh, I just feel really, really positive. There's so many nice people out there.
Yeah. And I think there is, to kind of pick up on what Tanni said, but, is much, as it is, I think the reality is it's a very different experience being a disabled man than a disabled woman. But I think one of the good things about being a disabled woman is the solidarity. I think generally women, I think because of, I'm not saying men don't have solidarity, I'm just saying that I think because of the way we are generally socialised, that women find it easier and have a different sense of what friendship is with other women. And certainly, I think without my disabled female friends, my life would just be not as great at all without them. And I think, it's one, and if you look at the disability movement, you see there are kind of key individual men, but actually when you look at who runs organisations, who organises campaigns, who does, the leg work, the wheel work, the crutch work, the guide dog work, it's women. And it's always disabled women.
I think that's really important right now because, I think I've seen a change in the last year as well where, women's voices are being shut down.
Absolutely.
And women aren't allowed to have an opinion and there's a lot of mansplaining going on, I get a little bit of on social media, but it's like, I can't have an opinion on anything.
Yeah.
And it's like, actually, I can have an opinion on feminism and disability and, I can, but that really worries me how, stuff gets shut down really quickly. And that sort of feels like it's been dialed back a bit on the feminist movement, that we've gone back to, you should just be at home and not be out and not doing things. That kind of worries me. But actually, sport gives you the resilience to deal with some of that too, which is good.
What have been the moments that have lifted you, when Mandy, when talking about, things like the sandwich with Tanni and just giving that kind of lift? What have been the moments for you that have just kind of gone, actually, things are okay, or we need more of that?
The most joyous moment for me, and this is quite a while ago, and I'd like to see more of it just for more disabled people to experience it, was actually, I was at the original telethon demo outside London Week, and it is an iconic moment. Everybody talks about it, and I just remember that moment, that feeling of pride, yeah, but actually just that feeling of strength of being part of something that was really significant, part of with people who were like me, and people I knew, people I didn't know, knowing how important it was for each individual person to have been there, both politically and just for themselves as well. And it was such a joyous occasion. It really was. And I can never go past the building without thinking about, poor Frank Bruno and the shock. Couldn't quite understand why so many disabled people weren't happy. But yeah, no, just that, it's the solidarity. I think that's always the joy for me, that feeling of being part of something larger than yourself and also being on the right side of history, or her story.
Yes. Yeah.
I think for me it was, there's kind of moments in sport which are pretty cool, but sport's quite selfish. Because, you might be doing it for the team and can't be really doing it for yourself, so because you want to do it. And so I think last time that there was an assisted suicide bill that came to the Lords, and it was really brutal and it was hard, and you're trying to make the right decisions, and I remember just feeling this huge weight of we've got to stop it happening, because we've got to be honest, disabled people will be on the list, that's it's just terrifying, and loads of protests outside. And it was just amazing. A lot of disabled people turned up, and some really clever and smart. Liz Carr did some really funny protesting.
Yes.
Smart and clever, and very well behaved. And I remember just getting to the end of the day and just being completely wiped out and exhausted. I'm very emotional, and I went out, and a couple of campaigners had waited for me to come out.
Good.
And I remember just going, thank you, for being there. I get quite emotional about it. And one of them bought me an ice cream.
Oh.
And it was just like, do you know what? At that moment in time, it was just the nicest thing. We just sat and had an ice cream outside Parliament. And the other side who wanted to change the legislation, I think one of their campaigns was about there till the end or something.
Yes.
And actually they'd left. And somebody borrowed one of their posters, and I was like, yeah, but they weren't, were they? And anyway, I mean, I know that's that's sort of slightly childish end to it, but that bit was just like thank you for waiting.
Yeah.
Knowing that those individuals wouldn't have a particularly easy time about getting across London, getting out of London, or all that stuff. They'd been there all day, and they waited. That was a really lovely moment.
I think that thing around the emotion and energy that it takes, and I think that's something we worry about for each other, don't we? We worry about each other in terms of how much energy it takes to fight. How do we keep up the momentum without draining ourselves, I suppose? It comes back to that solidarity as well, and allies. How do we keep that momentum? What is the...
It's really
who do we need to
interesting,
bring
isn't it? I think ultimately it's about a balance between, which is a phrase I hate, but I can't think of any other words for it, which is balance between self-care. Because we all know as human beings, and as human beings with impairments, one day is a good day, next day is bad. So, that, you need a level of self-care, and I think And sometimes even when you say self-care, what you actually need is you need the support around you to be able to have that. Because for many disabled people, they can't do self-care unassisted. Something self-care is a hot meal, and it's a balance between that and kind of taking some responsibility for effecting change, I think, and sharing, or if it's not taking responsibility, sharing the load with other people, I think, and just doing what you can, even if you're, stuck in, a house that you can't leave, but you're lobbying your local council for a ramp into your local swimming pool. That's activism. That's no less significant than being outside Downing Street or Westminster, and on Channel 4, being seen publicly, because some of us are able to do that and others are not. But the level of activism is no different, and the significance of that activism. And so I think it behoves us, to look out for each other as well as look out for ourselves.
I think for me, my resilience is up and down, and you have good days and bad days. And, as I get older physically, I'm changing. When I was training, it's like I could do anything. And, you kind of go, oh, okay, it's a bit harder to do a few things than it used to be. And that's a bit of a pain in the neck. That's kind of slightly irritating. But I think it's finding friends and allies. So, I've got a couple of people on social media that if I do an angry tweet about a train, they'll join in and ask me a question to give me a way to respond and talk. And, just really simple stuff, but it lets me, have a conversation rather than just a rant. And got a really good friend, Sue, who, when I first knew her, she said to me, how do I manage late nights in Lords? And I said, coffee and Haribo. And so it's not an advert, but she now buys me bags of sweets and sends them in. And you know what? That just makes me smile. I have to share them around because she sends quite a lot of sweets in. But so security officers get dibs on it as well. But it's things like that. It's little things that, and then trying to support other people who are going through different and challenging times. And what I guess the bit I get quite a lot. I don't know which. I feel guilty is I just get people expecting that I can just fix things and I can change it. And it's why haven't I changed accessible transport, and why haven't I changed universal credit, and why haven't I stopped PIP? And a lot of the time,
I'd like to ask that.
Thank you. And sometimes I'm really good at dealing with it, and then other time last week I was being challenged. It's like I can't fix everything. I'm trying. This is the best I can do, and sometimes I find that quite hard. Not just moments where it's like, okay, and then you kind of come away feeling completely useless. And then the next day I was totally fine again. But it's stuff like that I sometimes just find difficult to deal with. People just think I can click my finger and it'll be fine.
I think one of the benefits of getting older actually is I think, you learn, I don't necessarily think you know what you want anymore, but you know what you don't want. And actually that's useful. And I think also what you learn is, to pick your battles. Because, when we've got less energy and less time and resources to fight, we can't fight on all fronts. And who wants to? Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Who wants to be angry all the time? Do you know what I mean? Nobody wants to live a life where they're constantly... People say to me, why aren't you angry? Why shut up, big? You be angry. Then, people say sometimes you're in situations, someone will say to me, well, I thought you might have said something. And I'm like, well, you saw it. Why didn't you say something? Because it's always our responsibility. And you can't, you can if you choose to, but I don't choose to live my life, I like having a laugh.
Yeah.
I like a bit of comedy in my life, do you know what I mean? And God knows, it's an absurd situation, living as a disabled person in a non-disabled world. So, there's a lot of laughter to be had, frankly. Yeah. And it's usually with your disabled mates as well.
Yeah.
And that, again, that's part of the joy of the community that we belong to. Is that we're able to laugh together. And I think, so, and I think they're the kind of things I think that we need to think about, because, a lot of us are getting older now, and it's where are the new younger activists going to be coming from? Because, they haven't had necessarily the base that we've had. And again, I'm not advocating for special education, but maybe younger people have not necessarily had access to other disabled people over the years. And so, they don't necessarily have a group of friends or a group of people they know they have certain things in common with. So, you know, and that, so how do we build up young disabled people's self-confidence, their self-images, you know, to let them know, yeah, that it's okay actually, A, to say no, or B, to demand things actually. You know, there's no need to apologise for being a nuisance. You're not a nuisance, actually, you're just demanding the right to what everybody else takes for granted, like being able to get on and off a train when you want to, be able to go on the toilet on that train if you need to, you know, that these are about rights.
I was having exactly that conversation with a friend last week who's younger than me and an activist, and we were saying, okay, where are the young people? And I think, so I didn't meet a lot of young disabled people when I was young, but my parents were kind of really strong activists, and in terms of encouraging me to not be treated in a certain way, not take medical treatment I didn't want, and you know, I remember getting chucked out of a cinema when I was 7, my mum being fuming, and she was like, right, the next time that happens, you go back and you say, I've never spontaneously combusted before, because they'd said, oh, you're a fire risk. So my parents were really kind of, and they sort of delved into activism, disability activism really quickly. So I got that support there. And then I met more disabled people who were activists. But, you know, I see some, not all, but see some young disabled people who are just a bit grateful. You know, and it's like, oh, it's okay, I can't do... No, it's not okay. And maybe it's like they're, you know, they've got to do the stuff that's important to them.
Absolutely.
But one of the things I wanted to do around the 2012 Games was actually just... Because being a Paralympian does protect you from a lot of stuff. And I kind of wanted to do some activism training with some young athletes, because if they're talking about disability rights, or they'll get asked about it, is them knowing enough about it to be able to, or not talk about it, but to give them some of the skills to know how to deal with some of that stuff, and to talk, you know, to explain about social model, and it was one of those things that kind of slightly fell by the wayside, unfortunately. But that, yeah, if I could have done that, that would have been great, because I think there's a group of youngsters who, want to fit in, and I get that, but you can't forget that you're disabled. That is part of your life, and you can't just wish it all away. So, you know, maybe they'll come through, you know, I shouldn't, but I'm kind of conscious when I meet younger disabled people, I try and talk to them and encourage them and find what they're interested in, because it might not be what I'm interested in, but help them find their voice, because actually this is true for all young people. Young people need to find a voice.
Absolutely.
Tanni, Graeae's got a whole group of young people. If ever you want to come in and do that activism training with them, I think that would be brilliant, because that's something that, I'm always struggling with. What is the advice I can give young people, given what we're going through now? It's not the same advice you would give 10 years ago.
No.
And it is about rights, and it's about not being polite about things and knowing what you can ask for. So I think that's a brilliant initiative.
Yeah, I'll come in and have a chat. Well, very sadly, the word radicalise has taken on a whole different meaning, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, so you can't say it, but I kind of wanted to, you know...
Politicise.
That's way better, thank you. That's a way better word. But, you know, just get people to... Because sometimes I think, unless you've grown up, it's hard to know where to step into it and where to...
Or even if it's okay to say it as well, and to think it.
Yeah.
Because I think that's, you know, I mean, even as someone who's always been a disabled person... You know, my big appeal, I mean, I've always known I was a disabled person, never denied, but in terms of just being able to articulate it in particularly politicised terms, that didn't come from me till I started working in disability arts. You know, and suddenly I met all these disabled people who were talking and having conversations about things that I kind of thought about. I'd had no access to conversations or you know, and it was only, you know, meeting people like Charles Vasey, Elspeth Morris, and hearing people like Mike Oliver, Vic Finkelstein speaking, reading their writings, you know, and getting involved in disability arts and stuff that it gave me a whole community, but also what it gave me was access to the debate, the language, which is on, you know, and the debate is ongoing as it should be. You know, it's a living thing, and I think that's what I'm worried that it gets lost for young disabled people. Where do they go to have those conversations? Where do they go together to have those conversations, because, you know, if you're the, how do you raise it amongst a group of your friends if you're the only, you know, if you're the only blind person in the group, that there are issues for you.
I remember the first time I read about the social model, and it was suddenly this light bulb moment. It was like, it's not me, it's everyone. And it was kind of that, it just, I still remember it. I think my dad got it. And it was just this amazing moment where it just kind of made me realise. It kind of helped me realise where I fitted.
Yes.
And just that there were other people that thought the same as me and didn't want to just kind of accept it. Because growing up, my parents were told, like, you'll never get a job, I'll never get married, I'll never have a kid, I'll never. And, they just ignored it, which is cool. But also, I saw other disabled people who didn't grow up in that kind of supportive family and, did tolerate some, not great treatment.
Yes.
But my mum was always one, my mum always encouraged me to have a fight, which was great.
Yeah.
Usually with her standing 2 foot behind, going, go on, say something, go on. I'm not saying it for you, yeah. So, yeah, I kind of miss that with my parents, but there you go.
Is there, and maybe we can whack this on the website when we put up the transcript, is there anywhere that you would guide young people or any disabled people who aren't feeling like they have that community to go, if there's any websites or maybe groups that you're associated with that you would recommend?
I kind of try to follow as many disabled people on social media as I can.
Yeah,
and I'll give you a list, but there's loads of people, and I think it's important to, for me, to learn from other people's experiences.
Absolutely.
Because my experience as a wheelchair user is different from someone who's blind or visually impaired, and then some of the stuff we share is the same and some of it's not. I try to do that, and I think for me that's been really useful, just getting to know other people's experiences. That's been really helpful for me.
And I think similarly to Tanni, really, in key organisations, like, if people are interested or are experiencing, the negative side of austerity, then Disabled People Against the Cuts is a really key organisation. Sisters of Frida, which is a disabled women's collective, really important. And then you've got a whole host of organisations around the arts, like Graeae, key organisations like, and also if you're interested in the arts, the National Disability Arts Archive collection, NDACA, is really significant, because I think that's what's really important as well, for young disabled people, is to know that there is a history, that there are people out there who fought and, who've got us to this position. And while, things aren't perfect, we can get on the bus now. And that's not because of the generosity of bus companies.
Yeah.
It's because of the activism, of organisations like Dan, and people like Barbara Laziki and others who were, chaining themselves to buses.
I always regret that I never chained myself to... I've never yet chained myself to anything. I did
join
them.
Still time, Tanni.
I did join the WASPy Women's Campaign for the back end of the protest they had this week, and we're campaigning because of pension age. Women's pension ages are only awful. What's happening there? And one of the older women said to me, "Oh, you'll be fitting in with our age group, won't you? Kind of 65." Like, yeah, I'm not there yet, but thank you very much. Anyway, no. I quite fancy chaining myself to something.
Let's do it.
Yeah, and it's kind of traditional suffragette.
Yeah.
Tradition, really, isn't it? It's definitely a kind of feminist thing to do. I mean, I think it's, I think if there's one thing as well, I would have to, do the side of being disabled women, is I think that the feminist movement needs to wake up to us as well. Because I think, women's organisations know disabled women exist. And often we're invited to speak or whatever. But what I don't think they see us quite as proper women. We're not really proper women. I'm not really sure what that is about. But I think, it's like, and for me, I am a feminist. I've always identified as a feminist. And so, I go to a lot of women-only discussions and events, and for the amount of stuff that's discussed, and so often I get so hacked off because nothing around, people talk about diversity all the time, and yet disability diversity is never mentioned, it's never considered an issue. If it is, it's that there's a ramp and an accessible toilet, and that's about it.
It still feels like disability, whichever way you look at it, is like at the bottom. Do you know, whether you're talking about pay gap, because we talk about sex pay gap and BAME pay gap, but disability pay gap is not often discussed, or disabled people. It always just feels like disabled people are the last. And I'm just saying, it's like if you had a game of top trumps. Being a disabled woman, you wouldn't get many points, would you?
No.
And actually what's interesting in sport is there's very little difference in terms of how disabled men and women as athletes are treated, which is kind of, I don't know, that. So to me, that means that they're looking at them as disabled people who are athletes rather than male and female. So, I mean, there's probably a PhD studying this, but I'm the same. I kind of think of myself as a feminist, but I don't feel connected to some of the feminist groups in the same way, because I sometimes feel I'm there to tick a box. Yes. And when we talk about diversity and inclusion and equality in sport, I went to an event recently and it's like, I'm the only visible disabled person there.
Yes.
And I was on, and it's like, did you seriously just stick me on stage because you couldn't find anyone else?
Yep.
And I said that, and he's like, ooh, and I'm like, oh, okay, that was probably a little bit direct. But
or because somebody knows you as well.
Yeah.
And we'll get her in.
Yeah. Or, I get loads of, media rings that, oh, can you do an interview on such and such? Like, I know nothing about it. Yeah, but you're disabled. Well, I mean, I've got an opinion on everything, but that doesn't mean that opinion should be public. And, there's a whole bunch of stuff I don't know, but just because I'm disabled, it doesn't mean to say and so, yeah, I just agree. I think it's finding our place. And, again, for women at the minute, I think it's some really tough times. And it's really important that disabled women are part of that discussion, that we're not just seen as, we're not othered, or we're just not at the bottom of a long list of other women.
And I think, we have a lot to bring around, knowledge about activism, about supporting each other, that other groups can learn from, actually. So it's just fantastic,
The ramp and a vaguely accessible toilet that they've taken the brooms out of.
Yeah.
It's not inclusion.
No, or the mop buckets.
Yeah.
The mop bucket's always a good one.
Yeah.
To wrap up, the best thing about being disabled, mop buckets aside, Mandy.
Best thing about other disabled people. Yeah, genuinely it is. Because it's not the only saving grace, but it is. It's such a significant thing about how you being able to get on with your own life, knowing that there are other people trying to live their lives in a similar way that you can go to, that you can share perspectives with, that you can have a laugh with, people that got your back or your front or whatever, so that's what I would say.
That's a really hard question. That might be the only thing that I've never actually answered.
Ring the bell.
Ring the bell. There you go.
Change question. Yeah, we're bored, Jodi.
I want it on record that I've asked you a question that no one else has asked you.
I've been never have been asked that. But you know what? There are loads of good things in terms of, just friendship. Actually, me setting my own boundaries. Because there's lots of people who think I can't do stuff. And actually, I think I've kind of learned there's lots of stuff I can do. And I'm not afraid to try stuff. Or I'm not afraid to try doing things that slightly scare me. Because I've learned through living with an impairment that there's lots of things I can do.
I mean, it's tricky, isn't it? Because I actually don't have a problem. Because I would never have lived the life I live.
Exactly.
I would never have had the life I have. And the experience I've had if I wasn't a disabled person. Including where I'm living now.
I'd be a boring solicitor if...
yeah, and so...
I'm disabled.
Yeah, so, it's just who we are, and I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not, sometimes it hacks me off, but that's not about me. It's about the way the world is. Yeah. The way the world doesn't accommodate me or allow me to contribute in the way that I want to, or I can.
And do you know what? It's not the worst thing in my life.
No, exactly.
Not even, so... Yeah. It's like, there's plenty of other things that I'd kind of put before being a wheelchair user. There's lots of things that are quite cool as well.
So look up Mandy and Tanni on Twitter, offer them sweets and sandwiches. And thank you both for being here today.
Visit graeae.org and disabilityarts.online for details of productions, events, interviews, opinions, reviews and learning opportunities.